We have today and tomorrow, and then it's Yontif, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Sunday. So there's a lot of time. So yeah, the plan is, I actually didn't realize how far we went when I sent out the recording today. I don't know if anyone listened to it, but I realized that we mamish got through 2/3 of Lamed Aleph, Lamed Aleph. We're holding all the way towards Tana Yavish. We're about, I don't know, 22 lines to the bottom. The first line is dummy. Tana Yavish. So Lamaisa, at the end of this week, we're gonna have a full two blot to Chazer over Yantif. So it's not, we always say it's a little bit, and then boom, before you know it, it's
exactly during the Avodah, well, that's rush. That's different. There's always time. There's always time. That time where you're looking for the papers.
That's right.
yeah. Who is time or Shana? Okay. Anyways, yeah, I know, but I think Dalam could. It's true. We could get a shikul chazara. We should make a push. For a shikul chazara. But for now, let's go. New Gemara. Tani Yavish. Tana Yavish. About 22 lines to the bottom. The first line is Dami. Tana Yavish. Now this Gemara today and tomorrow is going to bring us back to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah spoke about Lulav HaGaz, Lulav HaYavish. We spoke about why is Lulav HaGaz, Lulav HaYavish Pasol. We spoke about the din of Hadar. Pre-eats Hadar. The question is, that's by an Esrog. That's by an Esrog. Pardon. The question is, how does it relate to everything else? So Tana, here we go. Lamed Aleph, Tana Yavish. Pulse. What Yavish? Who Yavish? The Gemara will get to in a moment. Yavish Pasal, Rav Yehuda Machshir. End of Braisa. Amar Rava. So comes like Rava. Rava says, what exactly is this machlekes between the Tanakama and Rav Yehuda that says Yavish is Pasal, and Rav Yehuda says it's kosher? Amar Rava says Rava machlekes is belulav. The machlekes is what happens if you have a dried out lulav. The Rabbanan Savri. The Rabbanan hold it's possible. Why? Makshinon. We make a hekish. We equate. We connect lulav laesroik. We understand that. Ma esroik, just like in esroik we learned in the Mishnah. But hadar, there's a din of hadar that an esroik has to be beautiful. Af lulav. So to a lulav by hadar. Very good. Rav Yehuda savar no. Loi makshina lulav leesrik. So says Rava, a dried out lulav is a machlekes whether it's kosher or not. Aval, however, be'esrog, when it relates to an esrog divrei hakol, everyone agrees. Hadar be'inan, your esrog has to be hadar, beautiful. Period. End of part 1 of today's share. So we already knew this partially. We knew an esrog needs to be hadar. And now we learn whether a lulav has to be hadar is a machlokes Tanakama and Rav Yehuda. Tanakama says yes. Why lulav? Just like esrog. Rav Yehuda says no. The din of hadar is only a din by esrog and not by lulav. Baruch atah Adino Yelina Melchilam Shakol Niyah B'Dvarei. Good. Ask the Gemara. 1 second. Ubelulav loibai Rav Yehuda hadar. Is that true? That Rav Yehuda does not require your lulav to be hadar? Does not have to be beautiful? V'hatanan. But we learned in a Mishnah. Rav Yehuda Imer Ya'agdenu milmayla. Hopefully this should sound familiar. This is our Mishnah. Rav Yehuda said, end of the Mishnah. What if you have your separated lulav? You have the leaves flapping around. What do Rav Yehuda say you do? Bind it on top. My time. Why do Rav Yehuda need to be bound? Well, the simple reason is what? It's pretty ugly if it's not. Lav misham, is it not because Debay Hadar? So ask the Gemara, you're telling me that according to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no din of Hadar by a lulav. There's no din of beautiful by a lulav. 1 second. Seemingly there should be. Answers the Gemara, no. Rabbi Yehuda does not require Hadar by a lulav. So why does Rabbi Yehuda require you to tie together a lulav, which is spread apart? Kitikitani taima. Like we learned the reason. Rabbi Yehuda Imer Misham Rabbi Tarfin. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Rav Tarfin. Kapois Tamarim. Says the pasuk, what is a lulav called? A kapois Tamarim. That is the name. If you look at the pasuk on the side of your Gemara, v'lakachtem lachem b'yom harishayin pri etzadar kapois Tamarim. What is the word kapois Tamarim? It's a descriptive term of a lulav. Says Rav Yehuda, kapois. You know what the word kapois means? That ve'im haya parud. That if it was parud, if it was separated, yechaftenu, bind it together. So answers the Gemara, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda requires it to be bound is not because it didn't have hadar. No, I don't care. Your lulav could be nice and dry, and your lulav could be nice and ugly. I don't really care. Why does he require you to bind it together? A gezira sekasef. Pasuk calls, describes the lulav as kapois tamarim. Explains the Gemara. The word kapois teaches us that it has to be bound. Period. So we had a question on Rabbi Yehuda, and we have a teretz. David, are you getting attacked? You are getting attacked. Baruch Hashem. 1 David, 0 fly. We won. Baruch Hashem. Erev Tov Rav Tzvi. Says the Gemara, why does Rabbi Yehuda require the lulav to be bound together? Again, the first thought it was why? Because it needs to be hadar, it needs to be beautiful. Answers the Gemara, no. It has nothing to do with beauty. So why does Rabbi Yehuda require it to be bound together? Pasuk. The pasuk coins, which is a fascinating detail. You can read the Torah. We'll read it on Sukkot. We read it in Vayikra. Pasuk says, "Lekachtem achem b'yom harishayin pri etzadar kapois tamarim anaf etzavois arvei nochal." So you read the pasuk. What do you think? Okay, on Sukkot you got to take your lulav and your esek. Finish. Would you dream? No. Says the Gemara, hidden in this pasuk is a new din, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that your lulav can't be spread apart. You have to bind it together. Continues the Gemara. Another kasha. V'loi by hadar. Does Rav Yehuda really not require hadar? Another question. But now we learned in the Mishnah. Ein oidin es halulav ela bimino. You're not allowed to bind. You're not allowed to tie together the lulav ela bimino, only with its own kind. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Why do you have to tie the lulav with its own kind? My taima. Says the Gemara, you know what? It's a color scheme. Lavi shum to buy other. It got to be nice. You know, imagine taking a rubber band, putting it over your lulav. It's not gishmak. Now, just parenthetically, I was bothering you.
You could put something nice.
Oh, yeah, very, very good. Get silver rings. Yeah, it is a very good question. It's to something the Gemara does eventually deal with. It is interesting why the Gemara assumes that there's an element of hidur.
The pinnacle
Yeah.
of Hidur is using a
Yeah, it is interesting. This might be, it's interesting. I want to leave it at that. It's definitely an interesting detail. That's what the Gemara assumes. Silver rings. Answers the Gemara, lie. Nope, that is not the reason. Says the Gemara, you know what the reason is? That you have to bind the lulav together with minai, with its own time. The reason is because of a memra of Rava. Da'amar Rava teaches Rava that when it comes to binding the lulav, Rava has a memra which he teaches us what you bind the lulav with. Da'amar Rava teaches Rava. I'm sorry, I'm distracted over here. I'm looking for what one word means. I'll be with you in 12 seconds. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. Here we go. Says the Gemara. Da'amar Rava afilu bisiv. Says Rava, when it comes to binding the lulav, so you were asking, do it with silver or gold, make it beautiful. So the Gemara proves it the other way. Says Ravo, you know what you're allowed to tie your lulav with? Afilu b'siv. Even with, the garbage that grows on the bottom of a tree. It literally means a fiber. Like the bark area. Filu b'siv. Va'afilu be'ikra. Or, says Rava, ve'ikra tedikla. Even use the root of the date palm. Meaning, clearly, not beautiful items, but they're parts of the lulav tree. So from the fact that Rava says you're allowed to use these items, which clearly are not the most beautiful, says the Gemara must have nothing to do with beauty. So then the question is, so what's the reason? Velamai di Rabbi Yehuda Hasam, important punctuation after Hasam. Velamai di Rabbi Yehuda Hasam. What is the reason, Rabbi Yehuda, over there? Why does Rabbi Yehuda require you to bind the lulav together with minoi? Because he holds lulav tzarich eged. A lulav needs to be bound. So what? So why does that show us it has to be its own kind? Because v'maisi minachrina. Let's say you bring a rubber band, then havle chamisha mine. What are you holding? I'm holding a lulav. Hadas, aravais, esrog, rubber band. If it wasn't the same min, it's a different problem.
Dikla is considered the same min.
Dikla is the same min. So you could use a dikla. You just can't use, again, let's read it again.
Theoretically speaking, I could use an esser peel.
Correct. Mina means any of the dalaminim. Says Rabbi, you're allowed to tie it together with the parts of the lulav tree. So clearly not beautiful. So why does Rabbi Yehuda require you to tie it together with mina, its own min? Well, in my time, Rabbi Yehuda, awesome. The katsavar, he holds lulav sarich eged. He holds the lulav needs to be bound. Meaning, now just listen carefully. Who cares lulav tzarich eged? Well, that means that it makes it an intrinsic part of the lulav. Let's just speak it out. If you held lulav doesn't need to be aged, then we wouldn't care what you put on it, because whatever you're doing is just an auxiliary part of it. If you hold lulav sarich eged, that means it's part of the mitzvah itself, and therefore, v'yimaisi mina achrina havalu chamisha minim, it would be 5 minim, and that is a problem. Period.
I thought the whole reason is hadar.
By an esrik. Very good. We're now discussing particularly a lulav. Rav Yehuda was of the opinion that a lulav that is yavish is kosher. Why? We said Rav Yehuda holds we do not equate a lulav with an esrik. The Gemara is bothered. Meichatesi. We seemingly have two different mishnayos, which yes, seemingly dictate that you require hadar by a lulav. And the Gemara answered no. Number one, the reason you need it bound is not because of beauty, but rather because of Xeris HaKasav. And number two, the reason you have to bind it b'minai, again, is not because of beauty, because if it was something else, you'd have a problem of having an extra min. But one thing is conclusive that we learned today. This is all about the lulav. But what about the esrog? Divrei hakol hadar b'kanan. Asks the Gemara, Ube'esrog mi boyi Rav Yehuda hadar. By an esrog, does Rav Yehuda really require hadar? Tanya, we learned in a brayso, 5 lines on the bottom. Arabas minim sheve lulav. There are 4 minim in a lulav. Loi matzah, kishem, just like shein poichas in mehem, you can't have less than 4. Kach ein moisif in alurim, you can't add on to it. Loi matzah esroik, if you didn't find an esroik, loi yavi, you're not allowed to bring. Loi parish, that's a quince. V'loi rimoin, a pomegranate. Yeah, it's an article word. What's quince? I have no clue, but it's one of those things. V'loi davar acher, not anything else. Okay, so far, do we see anything from this brayso? Nothing at all. Continues the brayso, kimushin, withered up, esroigim kshirin. Interesting. withered up esrogim are clearly not beautiful. Very good. Yeveshin, dried up esrogin, excuse me, psulin. Rav Yehuda Imer, af yeveshin are kosher. V'omar Rav Yehuda, listen to this one. Rav Yehuda proves his point. The let have a dried up esrog. Maisa, there was a story, Bibinei Krachin. There was a story with the people that lived in the cities. They didn't have a lot of orchards, not a lot of esrogim. You know what they did? Shayamayrishin as lulaveim libnei b'neihem. They would give over their lulavim to their children. So what do we see from this story? We see really two things from this story. Number one, we see that a lulav doesn't have to be hadar. That's fine, because clearly if you inherit your lulav to your son, it's not so beautiful. But what else do we see? We see that they didn't have any esrogin. And what do they use? They even use these dried up esrogin. So asks the Gemara, what's going on with Rabbi Yehuda? Answers the Gemara, Amru lahem misham raya. What's your question? Ein shas hadachak raya. Okay, but 1 second. Which part was the shas hadachak? The Bnei Krachin, which was which part? Dealing with what? The lulav. What did it say in the bottom of an aleph? What did it say about a dried out esrog? Kosher. Asks the Gemara. 1 second. That's the end of the brisa. Katani mios. What do we see in this brisa? Rav Yehuda Imer af yeveshin ksherin. My love, is Rav Yehuda not talking about a esrog? Says the Gemara, loy alulav. Now, in the reading of the brisa, pretty not kishmak, because it was talking about esrogim the whole time. But that is the teretz of the Gemara. We're going to stop over here. We have 3 minutes. Let's try to read this. So I got a lot of reading over here. Tomorrow, what we're going to do one more shtickle Gemara, and then we're going to have a lot of chazer over the Heliga Yamin Arayim B'siyata Dishmai.